He's like, yeah, and he goes, I just want to let you know, if you decide to talk to the elders, I promise you, they're not disfellowshipping you. They haven't been able to reach me.
They've been trying to intervene.
Right, but 24 hours after my videos appear, I get random phone calls from elders that are local that, oh, let's set up a shepherding visit. So, which I found interesting. And then I told my dad that, that they had called. He's like, yeah, and he goes, I just want to let you know, if you decide to talk to the elders, I promise you, they're not disfellowshipping you. And I thought that was interesting because, for anyone, what I did, it would equal disfellowshipping.
No questions asked. You would be disfellowshipped.
Yeah.
Like the next week.
Yeah, they would talk to me, see most likely I wasn't repentant. And
make that decision.
And make that decision for me of disfellowshipping me, so punishing me.
Right, and make it public.
And then make it public. Yes, they have this public announcement that, Brandy Schmiedel is no longer one of Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah. But in this case, they were negotiating the disfellowshipping.
Yes.
And why do you think that? Why do you think they were doing that?
Well, because I think, that was my biggest fear growing up, honestly, is getting disfellowshipped. I was very familiar with disfellowshipping. My grandfather of mine had been disfellowshipped. My dad had been disfellowshipped. My mom had been disfellowshipped. My brother had been disfellowshipped.
So you had this deep-seated fear of being disfellowshipped, and they were manipulating or playing on that.
Yes, because it is this, it's this thing. It's the worst punishment you could get as being a witness. It not only so whatever you're doing that's wrong, or you decide to confess, or you have someone that's told on you because they either saw you do something wrong. I've even heard of them actually sending spies and sitting out in front of people's houses and waiting for them to catch them doing something wrong. So it's constantly reinforced, this fear of you're going to get in trouble. It's always about, I just remember growing up, it's always about getting in trouble.
So in this
and disappointing
offer,
Jehovah.
Right. So in the offer of having this shepherding visit, what was the feeling or sense behind that for you? Was it that they were intimidating you? Was it really shepherding?
First of all, them calling me within 24 hours of that video coming out.
Right.
He didn't mention the video at all when he called me. So, yeah, could someone say he wasn't calling because of that? Sure, but that's unlikely.
Correlated.
It's too correlated, especially to someone calling me that I have never spoke to or met or been to their congregation ever before. So, he was trying to get where I lived so that they could come by to see if I was in their territory. So each congregation has like a special territory, and that's the territory that they go witness in.
Okay.
So if I live within that territory of that congregation, that's the congregation I'm assigned to go to.
All right.
So I'd never gone there. I'd never associated with any of the brothers and sisters, elders there. So I didn't know who this person was. And he was just trying to get a lot of personal information, which is very strange because any other instance of anyone calling you out of the blue that you don't know that's trying to get that kind of information is very weird, very creepy. It's just really honestly very inappropriate.
It's invasive.
It's very invasive. And that he assumed, and you could tell he didn't want to be calling me.
Trying to do his job.
It sounded like he was checking off a box. I was asked to do this. I drew the short straw. however you, and then they
So-
called me back with the circuit overseer
Okay.
and left messages because then I blocked them. So
Mhm. Mhm.
trying to then, that uses more intimidation
Mhm. It
because
almost
that's a
sounds
hierarchy of like someone over an elder
okay. Right.
is now,
It's like the manager,
yeah,
and then the regional manager is calling
Right.
you. Yeah.
yes.
It almost sounds the response like when the sense that I get with this quick response after you're posting your information in your video, that it's almost tactical.
It felt very tactical.
Mm-hmm.
They were trying to play on my fear of getting in trouble
Mm-hmm.
and using that to
Mhm.
try to either talk to the brothers and get spiritual encouragement
Mm-hmm.
so I don't continue doing it.
Right. And when they say encouragement, that means stopping this behavior
Right.
that you chose to do of your own volition.
Right. And I was very thoughtful about making that video.
Mm-hmm.
And another tactic that I know my dad even used on me, and it was shortly after I had made the videos. He goes, "I'm not going to try to convince you to come back,
Mm-hmm.
but he goes, let's just say Steven makes it into the paradise. What am I going to tell him when you're not there?" And I was like, I'm sure he'll understand
Mm-hmm.
and be just fine.
Right.
So, it's a lot of emotional
Yeah.
manipulation
Right.
of playing on things that you'd been taught and indoctrinated with.
Mm-hmm.
And, I had to be much further along in my process of leaving to be very certain and know that, and very okay with the position I was taking and leaving and that sort of thing. So I was okay, but it still is.
But still to hear that from your father,
Yeah.
and on top of that, you're hearing a mixed message. I'm not going to expect you to come back. I'm not going to try and
Convince you.
guilt you.
Right. Guilt. Lots of guilt.
But at the same time, I'm going to manipulate your emotions
Mm-hmm.
about your brother who's taken his life.
Yeah. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And that is to me what a lot happens and goes on within that organization.
The manipulation.
The manipulation of your emotions.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because it's just, as we were talking about, especially I think you can see this more when you have new people that are coming into the witness organization.
Yes.
The love bombing,
Mm-hmm.
they, of course you see a new person, you want to invite them into the fold,
Mm-hmm.
you want to make sure that they feel welcomed,
Mm-hmm.
this is the best place ever,
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
of these things.
Yeah.
We're having a get together after the meeting.
Yeah.
Won't you come join us?
Right.
And so you immediately have friends.
Yeah. Right. And which is very appealing to someone who's in a more vulnerable state.
Yes. But what happens after you've been fully immersed, indoctrinated, is then the word fear bombing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we came up with that term.
Yes.
Fear bombing.
And it's just this reinforcement of fear of you're not doing enough.
Mm-hmm.
What if you do something wrong? What if Jehovah doesn't forgive you?
Mhm.
What if you don't make it into the new system?
Mm-hmm. What if?
Because you're not doing enough.
Mm-hmm.
And there's always a higher standard to try to achieve, especially
Mm-hmm.
for men
Mm-hmm.
in the organization. Because, it starts from childhood. By the time I say you reach, I would say 10 to 12,
Okay.
they are telling you, start considering baptism.
Mm-hmm.
And then that just locks you in.
Mm-hmm.
But
Because you've made this decision or a commitment
a vow
Mm-hmm.
to God.
Right, and to go back on that would create guilt for yourself
Correct.
on on a level where on like your own. I'm not trying to say interpersonal is not the word I'm looking for. Um, so there's this cloud of guilt if you go back on your own word.
Yes. And you are now disappointing Jehovah.
Mm-hmm.
And what is your heart condition?
Mm-hmm.
And
talk about the heart condition a little bit more.
Well, they always say we can't judge people's heart conditions. Only Jehovah can know that.
Mm-hmm.
But
what is a heart condition?
Right. Well, I don't. It's supposed to be. Yeah. It is the heart condition. You're supposed to have. You're fully committed into being in part of Jehovah's organization, being a Jehovah's Witness, and what all that entails. So that's being a good witness. That's going out in service. That's giving your all.
Your blood, sweat, tears, and your heart.
Yes. And the thing is, though, your all. So something that used to bother me when I was in was you would see all these people, so at assemblies or convention, they would have all these people come up and they would interview them, and they would basically give their example of how they've sacrificed their lives to give their life fully to Jehovah's organization by being pioneers, by being need graders, by being a ministerial servant and regular pioneering, by doing these different schools that allows you to give more. And so it always frustrated me. You have the normal group of witnesses.
Okay.
That's
the
just
main
meet
the congregation.
That's trying just to get by and to raise their family or make a living, and they're doing the best that they can.
Right.
They're giving what they can, but you're never able to feel that you're giving enough because they would tell the people that look at the blessings Jehovah's giving them because of their sacrifice. And so that always bothered me because I'm like, well, what about everyone else that's trying to do the best that they can? Is that not, why am I not getting any blessings? Or is it was just a very...
Well, it creates a cognitive loop that I'm not good enough. It's an internalized belief. And when you're talking about that process, it reminds me of, it sets you up for anxiety and depression. Because depression is worthlessness and failure and not being able to achieve. And then anxiety is the motor that runs it. And you have, with the Jehovah's Witnesses, you have this motor that I have to do more. I have to always be doing something. And if I'm not doing enough, then there's something wrong with me. Then I need to talk to somebody about that. So it sets you up to have an unstable emotional life.
Well, yes. And I think even especially for, I would assume, the men of the congregation, because they have this, hierarchy that they're trying to achieve, that it's imposed upon them. So after if you're not baptized by, you're getting encroaching on 18, first of all, that's what's wrong with you.
Way too late to be getting baptized.
Way too late to be getting baptized, female or male. But, for men especially, they're, they get baptized, then why aren't they reaching out to be a ministerial servant? So that's the next. So pioneer, maybe if they're pioneering, then they usually will probably get appointed a ministerial servant if they're being a good example. And there's a litany of things of what that would entail.
So there's a constant pressure organizationally that in order to have the social approval, that you need to be working towards moving up in the hierarchy.
Because if you're not, then something most likely is wrong with you.
With you.
Yes, with yourself. Or if you have a family, your family is hindering you from moving up in the ranks. So, for, I think most men, and probably for my husband, he became a ministerial servant, and he was asked to become an elder, but that was something he chose not to do. Or when we had our children, I was missing a lot of meetings during that time because they were really challenging, and I was exhausted.
Yeah.
And it was that my neglect of going to the meetings reflected poorly on him. Now, what he did not reflect poorly on me. Only what I did or did not do would reflect poorly or highly on him, because it means he is providing over his own household. He has control of his household, so that goes back on him.
Yeah. And I'm hearing a reiteration of this cycle of guilt. I'm not doing enough. And members in the congregation will let you know if you're not doing enough, or they'll let you know they noticed that
in very usually passive aggressive ways. They'll start very passive aggressive way. Like, oh, I noticed Brandy wasn't able to come to a meeting again today. Is she okay?
Very nuanced guilt.
Yeah. And then that puts pressure on the husband to then come back, and then that will probably create tension
in the marriage itself. Yeah.
Because I'm not doing enough to promote for myself and or for him. So it's this constant, you're not, which is hard to meet that perfect criteria, but.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about the sort of specific examples that are unique to Jehovah's Witnesses. I think we had talked about a couple different examples, and there's some terminology of marking talks.
Yes.
And how that's some emotional manipulation too.
Well, yeah, so it goes from the marking talks to being, announced that you've been reproved. So if you've done something, if you've broken a rule or going against a doctrine, and you either confess or someone has told on you, either can happen. Okay.
So it's, you self-confess or someone else gets you into trouble.
Correct.
Has spied on you and gets you into trouble.
Or heard something that you said or saw something that you did, and it's bothering their conscience, and then they need to go talk to the brothers because you've now done something wrong.
Okay.
So I think it kind of all falls in line under that of the marking talks. Is so if something has happened in the congregation, or someone has done something wrong or questionable, or has been known or involved in something that was bad, they'll usually have a talk. They will never name the person in the talk, typically, but they will talk all around it, and everyone knows who they're talking about.
Okay.
And so they detail out, basically what's been going on. And so that's called a marking talk. So now everyone knows, because everyone's kind of heard in the grapevine. I mean, Jehovah's Witnesses, gossip is everything, and everything spreads like wildfire.
Okay.
So even if it's like 3 congregations over, you're going to hear about it.
Okay. So in terms of marking talks, you were involved in one of them? Or,
no, not that.
That's
no.
More, or you were more in the reproved.
Right. I got privately reproved. Right, because, I did something that was against the rules, and I confessed, and it was, they decided that I could be privately reproved.
Okay.
Since this wasn't anything anyone else knew about, or, it wasn't this big public to-do thing, it can stay under wraps, so to speak.
Right. Okay. But in exchange for that, permission or forgiveness or grace that they gave you, you had to go into great detail about this thing you had done.
Correct. I had to go into great detail. And so I was 18, and, it can be very embarrassing having to talk to 3 older men about something that you've done wrong. I think depending on the variety of what it is, how controversial to I'm having these thoughts, like it's very, first of all, it's very embarrassing to have to talk to someone about,
And intimidating.
it is extraordinarily intimidating.
Yeah.
I actually did it with the initial conversation with my parents there, which was also mortifying. And which I don't know why that happened, to be honest, but it did. And so I was having to be very descriptive, not only in front of men that, the elders in the congregation, but also my parents.
Yeah.
And so I remember, it's funny, I just remember this. I remember I didn't cry the whole time, but that's just not me. I don't cry initially. I cry after the fact.
Okay.
So it wasn't a reflection of my emotion or lack of. It was just I was getting through it. Here it is. And then I cried like during a prayer after they prayed over it or whatever. And my dad was like, "Oh my goodness, I was so worried you didn't cry through the whole thing, and you finally cried because I was worried that they wouldn't find you repentant."
Oh, okay. So your father's saying, "Oh,
You need to show repentance. You need to
Yeah.
show emotion, so you should look like you're repentant."
Okay, right. So manipulating your own emotions is what your father was getting at.
And so then after that initial, then I had to go personally talk to 3 men, describe everything all over again in very great detail. And then they decided to privately reprove me. But I didn't have a barking talk. But it's the same. It's saying from the platform, that was what I was most worried about, is are they going to make this public? Am I going to get disfellowshipped? And then my name's going to be announced from the platform to the whole congregation. And now everyone knows I've done something wrong.
Yeah. So it reinforces this. Not only does it reinforce the reliance on the elders to make decisions about your life and to direct your life, but it also reinforces this catastrophizing and building up the story in your head of through fear.
Yes.
That I'm publicly going to be shamed.
Yes, that was the worst. The thought of being publicly shamed. That was the most terrifying piece.
So you were willing to go into great detail to spare yourself the agony of going through public shaming.
Yes. Yes. So privately being shamed.
Right.
Yes. And then, then that stays with you from congregation to congregation. That gets passed on, that you've been disciplined. So even if you move to a congregation, it's not like, okay, you can leave that behind. It travels with you for the rest of your life. So, can you imagine doing something outside of the rules or boundaries or whatever, and at a young age?
At 19.
And they're not following you.
Any church you go to, anywhere you move. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Because there's a letter that gets sent that basically those elders are telling your new elders, this is what we think of this person. So they're setting a tone before you even get there. So if they have any animosity to you at all, you're most likely getting a negative letter.
Okay. So it's another way to reinforce reliance on the elders and the church, in terms of they are going to represent you, future you, and so you want to please them and have your behaviors in line with what they approve.
Yeah. And have your attitude in check. Because even if you're still taking off the boxes from the standpoint of, you're doing the things you need to be doing, you have to have the right attitude. Can't have a bad attitude. Can't be disrespectful. Can't be showing anything other than contentment and happiness with the process and everything. You can't show anything outside of that. That, because then they start questioning your, how you're believing or what your thoughts are or what your behaviors are. Are you being a good witness? Are you doing things? Are you straddling the fence?
So constant just state of questioning oneself. Am I enough for Jehovah? Am I enough for the church?
Right. Because if you're not enough for the church, for the elders, for the congregation, then you're not enough for Jehovah. You can't distinguish between the two. So they are one and the same. They like to separate them, but you can't separate them.
They want you to believe that they would say that they're separate, but but in action, it's that they represent God and that they can pass judgment the same as God can.
Correct. And you brought up this emotional abuse that I don't think I ever considered. I mean, because it is just a state of fear that you live in, and that's not something I ever even realized until leaving.
Because there's this reliance on the church for approval of anything, any decisions that you do, whether it's personal, financial, familial, social. So relying on that church is analogous to relying on like an intimate partner who requires you to please them and live up to their standards. And then there's displeasure and punishment and emotional control that way. And it's its own cycle.
It is, and it's constantly reinforced, and you constantly live there. And I even remember was when I was starting to leave, but I was still really trying to be in. And my husband had already left, but we got invited to a congregation get together, and he actually agreed to come, and I was really encouraged by that. And I remember we went there, and the love bombing that happens when people
at the beginning.
So he shows up and he goes to the get together, and you think, okay, this person's kind of faded out, but hey, they showed up here to this get together. Maybe there's a glimmer. That's and no one spoke to him.
They shunned him.
They shunned him at the get together, and it that really it was eye opening. It was very eye opening. Not the reason I left,
right?
But
and what did it show you?
It showed me the lack of love. Is what it showed me. Is here is someone, if you really want to do what you're preaching and bring people into the fold and love them and make them feel welcomed, you did the exact opposite. Because he had already shown that he was starting to fade away. So it's that natural.
It was a chance for connection.
Right.
Coming back into the fold. Having that connection and love and warmth.
Right.
And there was no love bomb.
There was none.
So what you're saying is you may be love bombed at the beginning.
Right.
But very quickly after that,
it stops.
Right.
It's really showing a lack of love and the showing that, oh, this person's not doing enough, so they don't matter. We're gonna not, we're not gonna give them any attention.
Yeah. Okay, so there's this confusion about what love is, what brotherly love is in the church. you've been out for a little bit now.
Mm-hmm.
So, what does do you have like a different definition for that for you now? Like what is your emotional health like lately?
Mm-hmm.
And you're still in recovery.
Oh yes, there's a lot of things that I cover every day.
Mm-hmm.
But I have learned the difference, like I said in my previous video, the difference between loving unconditionally
Mm-hmm.
and loving with conditions, or saying, I am only going to give you love if you do this for me.
Mm-hmm. Very transactional.
And that's what I discovered. That was the eye-opening point for me when we went to that get-together.
Mm-hmm.
It was a very conditional love.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a very big opportunity
Mm-hmm.
to prove me wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And, they didn't. And it was, that's...
Despite your life being completely intertwined.
Right.
Growing up in the church. And in that moment, you were looking for some answers.
Right.
And you found clarity.
Mm-hmm. And, it was just the lack of love that was so different than what they profess, who actually say that they show, is very different. That was a huge component for me.
Mm-hmm.
And then obviously manipulating my emotions.
Mm-hmm. Throughout the process of potentially leaving, or once you became a little more public.
Yes. So,
sorry, there's doggy.
it was a lot of it was the love part.
Mm-hmm.
It really was.
Mm-hmm.
It was the lack of love. It was the lack of emotional support.
Is she gonna stop?
Dixie. This video should be real interesting.
It's gonna be great, I think.
Go lay down. Now, lay down. You can't see her. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Except for maybe her tail. Lay down. Dear to good girl. So, my ability to choose to love someone unconditionally, that doesn't mean that I love someone now and they can do whatever they want to me.
You don't love bomb without boundaries.
No.
Yeah.
It's, it's knowing what true love really means.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's way better.
It's way better.
And, it's an emotional roller coaster. It still is. And I keep discovering new things and new emotions and realizing that, letting them ride and kind of seeing where they go and letting them pass. And
you're more in touch with your emotional life. You're allowed to express variety of emotions. And it sounds like you listen to them too.
It is. I do listen to them. I am definitely much more emotional person now. Because there was a joke when I was in, me and one of my girlfriends, she was like, we're just dead inside.
And that was a joke that you made.
That was a joke because we never showed emotion.
You weren't allowed to.
Well, I don't know if we were necessarily allowed to, like, other than sadness, like,
or guilt.
Or guilt,
Yeah.
or shame. Because those, if you have guilt and shame, then, the indoctrination, that's working. But when you have like anger or any of these, it's just not as widely received from the standpoint of, okay, that's a normal emotion to have with something.
So you're more limited in how you express yourself emotionally.
Yes.
And now
I'm not limited.
Yeah.
No.
Unlimited.
I'm unlimited, and I can choose to express it, and it's way better. It's way healthier.
And you feel, as a felt sense, that it's healthier.
Yes, it's much healthier. Yes. And I can be honest now.
Mm-hmm.
And the friendships that I have, the relationships I have, are much more honest.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to worry that what I'm saying to someone could be brought up and questioned at a later
Used
date
against you.
or used against me,
Mm-hmm.
or this person is having negative thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
They're having questioning thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this, I don't have to worry about that anymore. I can freely express myself
Mm-hmm.
and, you know, with my friends, and there's no conditions
Mm-hmm.
based from the standpoint, obviously, being a good person and a good friend to one another.
Mm-hmm.
Those
Right.
are some conditions that I have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Naturally.
But it's not conditioned on what I'm doing for you or how, that I can receive your friendship or receive love from you.